This episode of the Stuyvesant podcast is sponsored by Crimson Education. Are you a Stuyvesant student or parent who aspires to stand out in high school and study at top universities? Do you want access to the best mentors, strategists, and admissions experts to help forge your path to your dream university? With Crimson Education, you get strategic admissions support, essay guidance and editing, and leadership mentoring to help you discover your passions, to develop lifelong skills, and build a strong high school profile. Crimson students are 3 times as more likely to get into their dream schools than those applying alone. Crimson gives you the best resources and technology-driven tools to guide your dream university acceptance. Visit crimsoneducation.org or watch one of their videos at youtube.com/crimsoneducation. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
Hello, and welcome back to the Stuyvesant podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan. We've got
Shayon, Alan.
And today we're with BSL and ASPIRA. And we've got Melissa, Sarai, and Falina.
You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Sarai. I'm a junior, or I guess a senior now at Stuyvesant. I'm vice president of ASPIRA, and I'm vice president of the Black Students League. I'm really excited to be here. And other things I do debate, and I love to read.
I'm Melissa. I'm a rising senior like Sarai. I'm vice president of ASPIRA, and I also am in clubs like soccer, and I do sing. I don't really know, but I'm excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Falina. I am a rising senior too. Was co-president of BSL this year. Some things I do, I guess I do sing too, love step, and I am a fake cook. Let's put it that way.
I'm a fake cook too, so that's great. Anyways, as the Black Students League and ASPIRA, what do you guys do for people who don't really know?
Yeah, I can speak to that. We do a lot of really fun cultural events. So we have the Hispanic Month Dinner, which happens earlier in the year. We also have a Black History Month Dinner. But within our own organizations, we also do a lot of educational work. So we are usually, during the spring, we go to a bunch of college tours together as a group, which is really fun. We also host a lot of events around Stuyvesant, like our Talk Circles Around Race initiative that we led this year has been particularly successful. Yeah, we have a lot of fun.
Yeah, I feel like Sarai hit everything, but basically, yeah, we do lead the Talk Circles Around Race, which have gotten a lot more attention this year. And like she said, the events that we have, basically, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you guys would know, but can you run us through the history of ASPIRA and BSL? Just has it been around throughout Stuy's history? Because I think a lot of people just don't know anything about that. I don't know if you would either.
I mean, I don't know the exact year it started, but I don't think it's been around throughout all of Stuy history. But back when there was a lot more people, I know it was a bigger club. Then as it got smaller, I think BSL and ASPIRA merged only a few years ago. And yeah, that's
so did it completely die down in between?
Not necessarily. So I was talking with some alum earlier today, and there was just a bigger Black and Latinx population at Stuy. And then as the years progressed, the less students they had, ASPIRA and BSL had to integrate their clubs just because of maybe funding issues, or just there wasn't as much attendance as there could be. And that's actually gotten a lot better this year. So we're really happy about that.
Nice. And your faculty advisor is Mr. Cologne, right?
Yes.
Cool.
Oh, you guys have been doing a lot of work in the past, in the years I've been in Stuy. I remember a year or two ago, you guys were basically the leading voices in the community that stopped the use of the N-word. And from what I saw, it did help a lot of people realize that what they were doing wrong and to stop using the N-word basically. But I mean, it's still a pretty big problem in Stuy because if you remember something it was the expose group, Black and Brown at Stuy, that happened recently. And yeah, there's still a lot of cases of the N-word, but I just wanted to ask Like, what else as a community inside do you think we could like work on?
Personally, I don't feel like, well, the N word is a really big issue around size, especially like given that size population is like mainly East Asian and white. But there are also just like racist things that people are saying. Like the N word wasn't the most prevalent thing, even in the Twitter thread Black and Brown Exit Stuy. There are just a lot of personal experience and like microaggressions that people face that should also be dealt with. But I feel like are relatively overshadowed with us trying to combat like the people like saying the N word.
Have you guys like personally ever encountered any of that kind of stuff, or like tell us some stories of that time?
Yeah, people say a lot of racist stuff at the school. Usually they don't like to say it to your face, especially if they know that you're going to say something back. At least that's been my experience. But I've been called a monkey before to my face. I've heard yeah, you would not believe the things that happen here. But I think that what matters most, or like what's changing, is the culture of acceptance of this sort of behavior. And I think that what's been most productive, or at least what I would say has been most productive, has been the fact that ASPIRA BSL has focused a lot on changing the culture of complacency that Stuyvesant has. Because not everyone at Stuyvesant is racist, but I think that a lot of Stuyvesant people are silent, and that lets the issue ferment.
Yeah. So I think for a lot of people at Stuy, that like when it comes to, I guess, racial slurs and things of the nature, they, their excuse is like, oh, like, I didn't mean anything by saying it. I say it because people around me say it. Like, how do you respond to that, and how do you explain to them that like they're also, not justified?
You're still doing something wrong. Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of people justify themselves through that.
Like, I'll give you an example. Like my friend, right? I was talking about this podcast to him, and I sent it to Alan and John, and like he responded with like, "Wow, that's crazy," and then he still used an N word right after I told him that it's with BSL and Aspira, right? And I don't think that he's inherently racist, but like I think it's just like a product of like where he came up from, and like there's just like this weird kind of like strange acceptance around using it, even though they're not supposed to,
I think it's a hard question, because I think anyone can say, whenever they're held accountable for a word that they've said, that they didn't know. But I would also say that we go to Stuyvesant, and supposedly we're surrounded by some of the smartest students in the city. I think that a lot of kids are coming from neighborhoods where the word is really pervasive, and maybe they have a lot of Black friends who say it all the time, or a lot of brown friends who say it all the time. But when you come to Stuyvesant, and one of the first discussions that you start to have, at least in recent years, has to do with privilege and like going to Stuyvesant and what racism is. Especially, I think that a lot of English classes have started taking up that discussion during freshman year. I don't know if there's a really valid excuse for saying that you don't know that it's a hurtful word and that it's inappropriate. I think that a lot of people, what they really mean to say is, well, I didn't really care until XYZ thing happened, and now I think it's inappropriate, which holds them accountable for a lot more of what they've done and said, and I think is closer to the truth.
By the way, Veronica has entered. Sorry, back to you, Falina. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to add on to what Sarai said. Like, maybe there is that element of people aren't trying to be outrightly racist, but there is that, like, that danger of falling into that I didn't know, or, like, I really didn't, like she said, it's basically like I didn't care enough. Because there are people who are telling them, and I mean, someone has heard it at least one time, that it's not like a word you should be saying. And I feel like that's just, like, to use that excuse that, like, you grew up in a place where it's used a lot. Like, there's tons of words where maybe you could have heard a lot and you're not supposed to say it, and it's kind of like something you should know.
Yeah. I saw that. I think one of the things that the Big Sibs were trying to do was like sensitivity education come Camp Stuy. Do you guys know anything about that? Because I don't, but I feel like that's like a good, I guess, start to this whole idea of like educating people on these issues that they just kind of have left in the dark for a long time.
ASPIRA BSL has been pushing for that for a long time. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the letter, like the list of demands that BSL put out last year after the blackface incident happened. But one of the demands that we wrote on that list was to center race in discussions with some of the leaders around the schools, means SU, Arista, and Big Sibs. And we gave a presentation on sensitivity surrounding race issues last year. And I don't know if that happened beforehand, but it did happen this year too. It wasn't at Camp Stuy. It was before that. We hosted it in front of the Big Sibs exclusively. And the idea was to ingrain in people's minds, not that it was sensitivity training, because it's not. It was, this is your responsibility as a Big Sib, and your responsibility as a Big Sib includes your POC, by POC, like Black and Latinx and Indigenous POC little Sibs as well.
Yeah, I mean, after that incident last year, like a lot of discussion has popped up. I remember when, like immediately after the incident, I think after the list of demands went out, English teachers started talking about it immensely. I think Sean was in my friend's class as well. I think it was a discussion that popped up junior year, and it was, I mean, it was a good wake up call for a lot of people, I think, and I mean, it was just a productive thing that happened within our community.
What exactly like is sensitivity training?
Well, sensitivity training in general is like just like educating how to like interact with other people in the workplace and stuff. But I think like Sarai's point was that it was less of that and just more like understanding that you have people of different backgrounds coming. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sarai. I don't want to like put words.
Yeah, it's all good. I can clarify. So the reason why and maybe Melissa, Falina, and Veronica have different perspectives on this. I don't like the term sensitivity training because it implies that there's something different about what it is that we're saying you have to do for these specific little Sibs. And that's not the idea.
Oh, okay.
So the point of the presentation that we gave was to say, you are a role model in this community, and that means that you cannot tolerate racism. You cannot stay silent when racism happens. You need to be conscious that some of your little Sibs here are going to experience racism to a different degree than others. And as their Big Sib, you should respond appropriately to that. But the idea is to ingrain in the minds of Big Sibs that it is not different to take care of a Black little Sib or a Latinx little Sib.
Right.
It is your duty to do so equally the way you would do unto any other one.
Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of kids entering high school from like their local middle school, whatever, a lot of people say like Stuy's this like bubble. I feel like that the same holds true for a lot of middle schools, far out in Queens or like wherever else, that just like either through like lack of diversity or just because you're like in the same neighborhood, you're basically your entire life, you never really, I guess, get to know how to properly conduct yourself respectfully with people of different cultural backgrounds, religious backgrounds, etc. So I feel like, there's this weird, hard transition into society where people inevitably make these mistakes. And like, not that that's like any reason of justification, right? But I also think that like, aside from Big Sibs, I feel like there are classes. I know the English department has been moving towards, more discussions around race and whatnot, but I feel like classes like, I don't know, government and things like that should be put, I guess, closer to freshman year than, I guess, say taking it in senior year. I don't know what you guys think about that. I just feel like
I think there also needs to be like an upheaval of what they teach in government too,
Yeah.
Because like they teach, like a lot of what government teaches you is useful, but a lot of it is just like useless facts that you would just don't need.
That's true.
Right. But so like I feel like if you could just like rearrange that and also include like more
Yeah, I don't know.
Like you could educate more about like how like racism has
it gets weird
seeped into
because
the state, you know?
yeah, because if you think about it, like European history is like a whole year-long course. I forgot who made this point, but it like I don't know. That's kind of weird. Like to have like that replace like a whole year of like world history. I don't know. I guess that says something else about like where our priorities are and aren't. For let's take Juneteenth for an example, right? I feel like a lot of people have been learning about that for the first time this year. I only found out about that in A Push last year with Mr. Sandler.
Well, Veronica and I are kind of trying to do something about that, but specifically in the English department, we're kind of moving towards including more Hispanic or Latinx literature in classes. Especially, like as you said, if you can devote an entire year to European literature, why not be more inclusive?
Yeah, or history too, for that matter.
Exactly, and it's like it like alienates any like POC students when you read your first book by a Hispanic author in junior year and then never know how to talk about the culture surrounding that book. So I definitely think that needs to be changed.
How are you going about it?
We've made a list of books, poems, short stories, and we've gotten the approval from Ingram and Pedrick. So now I think we're going to put it through Contreras, and if he approves, we're going to start talking to Grossman about reevaluating literature classes.
Is this a separate course you're talking about, or are you just trying to implement more like literature from these authors into the regular class?
Not a separate course. We're just trying to.
I don't know. There's a lot of ways you could change how Stuy really functions in a way and make it better. But I think the main thing is that no one really teaches you how to be a good person. You know, no one really, like even in Stuy, like no one really teaches you how to be like a respectful person, how to be a good person. But the like you guys mentioned Camp Stuy and a bunch of, I guess, meetings and stuff like that we could like integrate more into when people first make the transition to Stuy to fully, I guess, be better people. I mean, it's not something that's really told to people in Stuy because that's not really kind of expected of you. But if we do want to live in a better society, we do kind of have to, integrate it in a way.
I think that's a funny thing to say, because I was just discussing with my friend the other day the importance of understanding the difference between a political issue and a moral issue. And I think that a lot of Stuyvesant students do not understand the difference, especially when it comes to race relations. Because, like, not saying the N-word, not calling other students racial slurs, not comparing celebrities to specific animals, that has nothing to do with political alignments. That has a lot more to do with respect and the way you conduct yourself. And I mean, I obviously don't think that Stuyvesant is going to start a philosophy class freshman year, but I do wonder, and I say this because I do debate, and the part of debate that I do is really, really focused around philosophy. And a lot of the people that I know who've done this type of debate have told me that what they've learned has a lot to do with the literature that they've read that concerns like what normative theory is and when it's okay to do something and when it's not okay to do something. And it's funny to think that maybe had people had the opportunity to learn more about philosophy and morality and what it means to be good, whether they'd be more open to understanding concepts about race relations and social norms and what's okay and what's not okay.
The closest thing that Stuy kind of has to that is like the guidance push-ins freshman year. And right now, there's a lot of guidance push-ins that aren't really the most relevant. And a lot of the time, I remember my freshman year, my guidance push-in would just be like a study period, basically. And I think if we used those periods better, we could talk sort of like what Sarai is suggesting. And like, while it's not a full course, it would be beneficial to the students when they're first sort of getting used to Stuyvesant to get these pointers on how to act that they might not have seen in their middle schools. like social norms and sort of how to act at Stuy and be respectful and make good future citizens and students at Stuy.
I mean, going back to what Sarai said about the difference between a political and a moral issue, I guess this kind of relates to, I mean, what's been happening around the world right now, I mean, especially in America. And a lot of people have been there's been a lot of discussion on staying silent and being a bystander and claiming that they'd rather not involve themselves in politics. And I think it's a topic that really relates to this because there's been a lot of claims that if you don't speak out, you're hurting the movement more. And there's also been a lot of claims that people just don't want to be a part of the movement because they're scared of people speaking out against them. And it's become this huge topic. And I mean, where do you guys stand on that? Because for people who don't, I guess, involve themselves within politics, I think this has become more of a moral issue, but I mean, that's just my opinion. And like, yeah, you guys can speak on that.
What people don't understand is that you are taking an action when you decide to not say something. And whether or not that action is worse than doing something, quote unquote, actively racist is up for debate. But I do think that being complacent and staying silent when an injustice is going on is to do wrong by the side of people who need the help. And the scenario that I would pose or that I like to bring up, especially when I have this conversation with my non-Black, non-Latinx, or just my non-POC friends, like my white friends, is, well, how do you think that the Black person or the Latinx person in that scenario feels? Do you think that they have the choice to either stay silent and be disrespected or to say something and put themselves at risk? Because I assure you that nobody wants to be vulnerable. Nobody wants to put up a fight. I certainly don't like to be conflictive, which seems to surprise people when I say that, but I don't. But when someone like actively hurts me or threatens me, then of course I'm going to feel the urge to say something about that. And even though you are not in a position where you are made vulnerable, where you are attacked or hurt, there is someone else that has been, and they don't have the privilege to make that decision the same way you do.
I'm kind of scared though. Like some people are going to be tired of being vulnerable. You know, how do you keep people's attention for longer and longer and longer? You know, it's like I feel like it's going to get harder and harder as time keeps going. You know,
I don't know what you mean. Like,
what can we do to keep preventing it? Like, how do we prevent the movement from fading or dying out?
Well, it's just like, it's as simple as, I don't know what you said to your friend when he said the N-word, when you texted them, but what you should have done was, hey, that's not cool. I don't condone that. It's as simple as integrating basic anti-racist practices into your daily life and making sure that you do not put that burden onto the Black or Latinx person next to you.
Got it.
As for things that we've been seeing online, you know, like, is there a line between like quote unquote like performative activism and like actual activism, like going to protests and stuff? But like, does it even matter, right? Because like in one way or another, it's getting the message across, whether or not the person actually believes in it. But I see that what I feel like is happening a lot of the time is that like, you know, someone posts something, but all of their followers are, you know, generally on the same page as them. So I feel like it becomes something where just it's like
an echo chamber.
Yeah, exactly. So
well, in my opinion, I think it's good that people are spreading awareness about this movement, especially if they know they have friends that disagree with them. But what they should be doing, like it doesn't matter if you're posting a story to your Instagram, if you're not signing petitions, if you're not trying to donate. And like there are even ways to donate without even if you don't have money, you can donate by watching videos
right
that donate the money they make. So I think it's being relatively lazy, kind of just posting a story and thinking that's it, you're done. Like it never ends there.
I saw this really, really good photo, and I don't know where it is because I don't have Instagram right now. But it was basically a diagram that shows like the scale of white supremacy versus activism. Melissa, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so it's the series of circles that shows an overlap between like the woke Black kids and like the semi-woke white kids, and then like the I don't participate in politics kids, and then like the hardcore white supremacists. And the idea is that, sure, maybe one person posting something doesn't make a super big difference. But if tons of people start posting, and then someone who is maybe less inclined to participate in activism sees that and feels pressure to do so, then somehow the message continues to disseminate into circles where that idea isn't common and it isn't pervasive. And these stances like Black Lives Matter that, believe it or not, are fairly controversial still to a lot of people, get translated to communities that beforehand would not have seen it. And obviously, a white supremacist seeing an Instagram post is not going to decide to not be racist. But the idea that this idea can be translated across all sorts of communities does matter. And I also wanted to say that I 100% agree with Melissa. Posting on Instagram is the least you can do. You do not post on Instagram and then stop. However, first of all, I think it's important to recognize that taking a stance that is controversial, like Black Lives Matter, that unfortunately is still controversial, does matter and it does have an impact, I would say. And at least insofar as it makes a statement as to your moral alignment. And the other thing that I would say is I am far more concerned with the practices that you take every day with your Black friends, for example, or your racist friends who you don't check, than I am as to whether or not you post it on Instagram. And I've received a lot of messages from people who told me that they're so sorry for being complacent and how they care so much about me and like the way that the school or how the world treats Black and Latinx people. And then a week later, I have a problem where someone lets racism happen again and they just lied to my face about whether or not they're okay with it. I think it matters a lot that we take action, and that can take lots of different forms.
Kind of like what Sarai and Melissa said, that I know for a lot of people, maybe that post is like their starting point because everybody has to start somewhere. And it's not necessarily a bad thing that you're posting or saying things, but like Melissa stressed, it's important that that's not the only thing you're doing. And if it is the only thing you're doing, to kind of like take a moment and stop and be like, okay, why am I posting this? Why am I doing this? Am I going to take it further? And if not, then that's like a conversation you kind of have to have with yourself and think about it.
And what I do like about the posts is that throughout this whole experience, I've learned so many things about like history that I'd never known, about like current legislations that I never would have heard of without this like sudden influx of people posting and sharing posts all the time. And so while it might not always be super helpful towards a direct, like while it's not going to be as helpful as a donation, I do appreciate people sharing things that help me educate myself. So that's what I think whenever I post something. But obviously you do need to do more than that. You do need to sign the petitions and everything like everybody's been saying. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's really important to like y'all have already said. I think it's really important to notice that posting on social media, yeah, it's a big first step, but it's really important to like not forget that hey, there's still a lot more you can do, and there's still so much more that is like can be done and that you can affect, because it's like changing things. Before you want to change things on like a larger scale, you gotta, if you really care about it, you gotta change everything. Well, to change the most you can on like a local level. It's similar to climate change, you know. Like before you can change, I don't know, like national law, you gotta do what you can in your own community, right? It's like you gotta stop using plastic bags. Yeah, you gotta stop using plastic bags. Stop using the air conditioner as often. You know, it's similar type of thing. These are movements, and you know, um, stopping your friends from saying the N word and stopping yourself from saying the N word and other derogatory terms is important, because before you could change everything on a national level and having big ideas, you gotta target yourself, I guess, within your own community and within yourself as well. And yeah.
I think like this wave of activism has been like the most successful that I've ever seen, because I'll tell you, like in my own family, like my parents aren't the most progressive, you know, I'm an immigrant, you know, it's just the way it is. They're just raised in a different place. But like talking to them about the George Floyd thing, like you can definitely see that there's like a change in attitude that's sudden, Because they just see that and then they go like, I've done that before. Nobody should ever have to die for such a crime so petty. You know what I mean? And yeah, I think I really like that part of the movement. Like there's a lot of people who you might not hear from specifically, but like still working on them too.
Speaking about George Floyd, it's been nearly a month. I think it's 3 days until it's a full month, but it's been nearly a month since the killing of George Floyd, and movement's still going on. People are still protesting. People are still speaking out. Stuff is still going on social media. But maybe Alan's already asked this before, but like, what do we do to like keep the movement from fading out and like keep speaking out in a way, and yeah, I mean, prevent this from just dying out?
That's a hard question. And I don't know what Falina, Melissa, and Veronica have to say, but what has been concerning me the most has been, because we're all like 17, 18-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, I assume that you're all that age, and I assume you're talking about our friends who are that age. I don't know. Alan, you're old. But yeah, exactly. My point is, though, I think that on a local level, what people need to start doing is understanding that when you decide that you no longer condone racism, because it is a decision that some people still have to make, you need to stick by that 24/7. And that means not keeping around racist friends. That means not condoning racism from your parents or your cousins or whoever it is that you go to get your hair cut. Like, you must choose that decision actively again and again. And I think that's much more moving to me than posting something on Instagram, because it's an action that actively changes culture, and it changes the way that people feel comfortable acting. Because I guarantee you that once someone starts losing friends over the fact that they say the N-word or say much, much worse things, they're going to stop. And maybe that's not the right reason, obviously, because we want people to understand that racism is bad for a variety of factors, but it's still something, and it might make the life of some random Black kid much easier later on. You know what I mean? People need to understand that they hold a lot more power than they think, and their silence is a use of that power that negatively hurts others.
Yeah, I'll also say this. I think that like on a larger national level, we have like higher expectations for police departments, and just like their actions and how liable they are to what they do. And I think I don't know. I think it's a good thing. So I feel like that's something that's come out of these protests, and it's something that I think is sticking around, which is definitely good.
Yeah, I was just going to say the biggest thing is the best way I'd say to keep the movement alive is to look at yourself and to look at the things you've been doing before that maybe you didn't even think were racist or were wrong, but then try to change those and try to get your friends or your family to kind of see that and change that and make sure that that's like something permanent that you're like actively choosing for the rest of like forever that you're going to change.
I mean, speaking on that, like something I saw recently circulating on social media was like around last week, I think, was the implicit bias test. And I think implicit bias is like a really important thing to talk about, like because I guess whether or not people believe they're racist, implicit bias kind of largely exists in like every single person because it's subconscious. It's really about implicit bias is kind of like how you were raised and like the people you like grew up around. And yeah, like if you kind of don't have implicit bias, you're like a very rare case. But like it's something that like people implicit bias, like whether or not like you have it or not, you should recognize if it's in you, I guess, or like you should recognize any biases you have and work on it, because if you're implicitly biased and you act upon your instincts in a way, like it could, it's not good. It's blatantly racist. It's blatantly targeting against I guess against certain groups, and I guess it's important for people to realize that, hey, you gotta work on yourselves in a way, and if you work on changing yourself, you can work on changing other people. And yeah.
So I'm not gonna lie, I haven't been to a protest, right? Because of my grandmother, she has pre-existing conditions, and I don't want to put her to that risk. So I wanted to donate, and I was looking around, and I saw like some sketchy stuff recently around social media, around like Sean King, then like the Minnesota like bail fund not using like a lot of their $35 million that they had. So I was just wondering, like, are there other ways that we can contribute financially so we can like make sure that our dollars make a difference?
I mean, the one thing I would say is that there's like a bunch of organizations that were around like before all this happened that have been doing great work, like the Equal Justice Initiative and others that you could donate directly to if you really wanted to like help. And I'm sure you can find a lot of them.
And I was just going to say, there's even local things that you can do. Like if you can't go to the protests, but you want to help, people that I know have been making like protest care packages for people who are out there protesting. You can give, you can bring masks, water, snacks. There's liquid antacid for tear gas, although that's sort of loosened up. But there's always more local efforts that you can see your money going directly towards.
That's a really interesting idea. I was thinking a lot about how you guys were talking about changing the English like curriculum a little bit to try your best to like include more Hispanic authors. And I was wondering like are there any other institutions that are just inherently racist at Stuyvesant? And like SHSCT was the first thing that came to mind. And I was just wondering if you guys wanted to elaborate on that.
This is a controversial opinion, but as far as I'm concerned, and I say this as a privileged Stuyvesant student, so I hope it's clear that my opinion is open to changing, but I don't think that the test itself is racist. And I told my friend, I feel like Candace Owens when I say that in like other settings, like besides Stuyvesant, because a lot of people disagree with me. I think that the question that we need to be asking ourselves has more to do with, well, what do New York City public middle schools and lower schools look like? And are they mostly one race, or do they tend to be mixed? Like, what resources are available to different middle schools, and how many people actually know about this test? So I work with students at a middle school in Sunset Park, and part of the work that I do involves like talking to their parents. And I was at a parent-teacher like conference night like 7 months ago. And for those of you that don't know me, my mom is from Spain, so I happen to speak Spanish, which means that I get to speak to a lot of parents that otherwise are not able to communicate extensively, at least not with only English speakers. So when I went there and I spoke to especially a lot of the Latinx families that were there at the parent-teacher night, and mind you, these are like 7th grade parents, right? And some of them were 8th grade parents. And I mentioned to them this idea of the SHSAT and Stuyvesant and whatnot. People said, ¿Qué es eso? What is that? People don't know that this test exists. And as far as I'm concerned, that's an injustice, even if it's just one family. But it wasn't one family. It was a multitude of families who did not know what Stuyvesant was, what the SHSAT was, and what specialized high schools are. And I think that a lot of work needs to be done getting this information and test prep to different communities that otherwise would not have access through word of mouth. I mean, there aren't WeChats for random Latino or Latinx or Black families around the city. You know what I mean? Like, it is a different network of communication. And when specific families or neighborhoods are left out of the conversation or out of the information loop, well, then obviously so-and-so isn't going to take the test if they don't even know it exists. And it was so frustrating to me to speak with families who had 9th graders and were there for like a 2nd grade or whatever, who were like, they could have gotten into a better school. Like this opportunity was available and I didn't know about it. It's an injustice.
Yeah, going off that, I went to like majority Black and Latinx Catholic school, and we had like good high school prep, but like every like high school prep night was just talking about the Catholic schools. I didn't even know about Stuyvesant until like 8th grade because I had a family friend who I went to public school for 1 year with in 1st grade, and her like we were tight with the parents, and their daughter went to Bronx Science. And I was like, oh, like, what's that? So I found out about this through like the furthest connection possible. And when I started like going through the application process for Stuy and like signing up for the SHSAT, my teachers were like, I don't know if you should be doing this. I don't know if you're going to be able to survive at Stuyvesant. Like, I don't know if this is the right environment.
What are they scared of? What were they scared of?
They were just, and honestly, I'm not sure because I was the valedictorian. I was the highest in my class. But they just genuinely thought I was going to like go there and kill myself. I was the first student from my school to go to Stuyvesant, like possibly ever. It's just like, that's not an option.
I mean, like in my middle school, like in 8th grade, it wasn't a very big school. It was like 90 kids, but like it was the SHSAT like was a big thing that a lot of teachers and guidance counselors in the school like kind of stressed upon. And like in all honesty, before that grade, I didn't really even know what the SHSAT was. I didn't know what Stuyvesant was. And like if it wasn't for my school telling me at the time, I probably never would have like came here. And thing is, like, I could even go back to freshman year when I was already in Stuy, and I played on this football team that wasn't Stuy yet. I hadn't played on Stuy yet, and I played on this separate team that was in Queens with this small like local team, and basically a bunch of people of color were on the team, and they asked me, "Oh, where'd you go to school? Where are you going?" And I replied, "Stuyvesant," and they had no idea what Stuyvesant was. They had no idea what the SHSAT was, and some of these kids were super smart. And in my head, I was going, "These kids could literally do better than me in this school." And in all honesty, like if they knew about it and they took the test, they probably could have gone to Stuy. And it sucks that uh, it's not us. Well, the SHSAT not being talked about more in like more smaller, lower income communities is it's pretty messed up. And I do agree with the fact that SHSAT isn't like the the test isn't racist in itself, but like the way that people are notified and like the system around it, I guess, is not um it's not really appealing to like people of color and like lower income communities. Yeah.
I think I kind of have a different point of view on this because I didn't go to the best middle school, but that middle school knew a lot about the SHSAT. But I was the only girl in my 8th grade class to get into Stuy. And then I heard from one of my little sibs that like 30 kids from her grade got into Stuy with her. And that was just a really big culture shock because like even if like a certain middle school may be like widespread about the information about the SHSAT, that same middle school may not have the resources to prepare them even for an adequate high school education. So I think the problem not only comes with information about the SHSAT being spread out to middle school kids, but about the lack of resources that comes with lower income neighborhoods.
Yeah, I think this also goes into that entire conversation about I just lost my breath. Defunding the police, right? So like take from their budget, put it into education and other community-based budgeting, so that these problems are less pervasive, if you will. Is that the right word? Pervasive.
Also, where'd you go to middle school?
126. It's in Astoria.
Yeah, I thought so. I went to 126 too.
Wow, look at that.
The year I went, 4 people from 126 went to Stuy.
4 people from my grade also got into Stuy.
Isn't that crazy?
Bad.
Isn't that crazy?
Do you guys know each other ish?
I feel like we know the same people.
I actually might come from middle school that like you said that was like 30 people coming through. Like a lot of people came from my middle school. I think it was like 20 people. Yeah. I feel like that was my end. So yeah. But yeah, it's more of a I guess a problem within like our whole system and like the public school system. and it's definitely something we could all work on. I mean, the government has to kind of work on, but yeah.
Okay. I'll ask like one last I guess question that I've been thinking about. I feel like 2020, given everything that's happened, coronavirus, the protests, George Floyd, I feel like it's like a huge turning point in history. Upcoming elections, that too. So I don't know. Do you think? And there's no right and wrong answer. I don't know. I'm just curious. Do you think that America can move past it's previous racism and just general I guess mistreatment of certain groups of people? I on one hand I feel like people are doing things in terms of educating themselves, and I think that's great, right? Like a lot of people have been watching documentaries. I know that the school has been doing not the school but the student union, BSL, and whoever else has been doing like documentary screenings. That's been super awesome. But I feel like on a widespread level, people don't like to admit that they're wrong. People don't like to change their views. I don't know. Are we stuck?
Yeah, I feel like that's a lot. It's hard to look into the future and say oh, we're gonna get past this sometime, and how long is that gonna take? I don't know. Personally, I mean, I think we can make progress. There's a lot that's been changing, and that's a great thing. And I mean, I don't know. It's a lot because when you think about even now the pushback that's been happening to Black Lives Matter, and you would think it'd be just common sense, or at least some things would just be agreed upon, but even those little things just aren't. And there could be any number of reasons for that, but I just think there's still a lot that has to be done and a long way to go.
For sure.
But not that it can't necessarily be done.
No, I feel the same way. I feel like we're making incremental progress. But any progress is better than none.
All right.
I guess let's close it out.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Stuyvesant podcast. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and be sure to also follow ASPIRA and Black Students League on their social media platforms as well.